Hey everybody, welcome to Conversations with Jackie and Bobby. My name is Jackie. I'm one of your hosts, and today I am joined by the lovely María Paula Aldana, and she's going to share her story and how she is sharing theology of the body in her country, Colombia. Colombia. And so welcome.
Thank you, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so good to have you. So you are in town for a retreat that we just had.
Yes.
And you are friends with Father Geronimo, who we had on the podcast earlier. So I would love for you to share your testimony and just share how, if you were raised Catholic or when you encountered Jesus in your life, what was it like growing up?
Okay. I apologize in advance if I mess up. I tried to make my English real good, but we don't know. So.
Oh, you're great. It's better than any other language I can speak.
Okay, so I was not raised Catholic. In Latin America, for those of you who don't know, it's Colombia, not Colombia.
Right. I spelled it wrong one time, like the university, and said Colombia. I said Colombia.
And it's a country in South America, next to Venezuela, next to Panama. And in Latin America in general, we are very Catholic-based. We are born Catholic, but we don't necessarily know what that means. So you have to go to sacraments and you go. So that's how I was raised. I had to go to this Catholic school. But even in Catholic schools, it's not necessarily a teaching of how you actually live out your faith or anything. So I did my first communion, and that was about it.
Okay.
I had no idea that you actually went to confession or went to Mass on Sundays. My family did not.
Okay.
And my parents, they had no interest in practicing the faith, the Catholic faith.
Are you the oldest?
Yes, I'm the oldest of three, and I have two younger brothers. So I was the only girl.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in a very loving environment. I love my parents, and they're really good parents. And we try, they try to teach us, good and bad. But when you don't have the faith and when you don't have, the moral basis of what it means to follow Christ, then that line gets diluted as you grow up a lot. Mm-hmm. So I remember, and I really do go into specific detail in my testimony. So you grow up with a lot of, pressure to be the eldest and to be so smart. So when I was really young, in school, I was always the smart one. And you start identifying yourself with what you do instead of who you are. Right. And we were talking about that in the retreat, when you start feeling your identity relies on being good enough or being smart enough. And you have to somehow be worthy of the love that you get.
It's achievement-based.
It's achievement-based.
I have to achieve in order to be loved, yeah.
And that's how I grew up. So I was the smart one, and I knew I had to do whatever it took to be the first one in class and do everything that I was supposed to. But then you end up growing up with so many wounds in your heart. And not necessarily because I was suffering from violence or, many really outrageous things, but deep wounds that you grow up with. And the first time, because my testimony and what I do now in my ministry revolves around sexuality and healing sexuality, it's because I was deeply wounded in that aspect, not necessarily because I suffered an abuse or anything, but the first time I saw pornography was when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
And what happens with that is that not only your cognitive process gets altered deeply because you're so young and your brain has not developed enough, but your spiritual life is wounded deeply because no one is there to guide you and tell you what are you seeing and what does this mean.
A lot of feelings come up. And my friend Matt Fradd, before he did Pints with Aquinas, he talked a lot about pornography and all those feelings of curiosity, feelings of shame. There's a lot of stuff that's happening at once, especially when you're little and encountering for the first time. You're curious, but you also know that maybe this isn't right, and but that's all happening. And again, if no one has ever prepped you, or no one's on the back end to talk to you hey, what you just saw, this is something that's good and beautiful, but it's for marriage. As a little kid, you don't know how to process that. You don't know what to do with that. And a lot of time then shame comes in.
Yes.
And then you want to see it again because those feelings may have come up, right? Those feelings that, again, are natural to the human person when we encounter something like that. That's a normal thing that arises. but you're driven to see it again or do it again or experience that feeling again, and you don't know what's going on necessarily.
Yes, and I think that right in the beginning, I just knew that there was this malice around it, and I wanted to explore it. I was always the kid, and you mentioned it, like the mature one. You're too mature for your own age, so I was always hanging with adults and stuff. Like I was not aware that this was not for kids because I did not necessarily feel like I was a kid, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was old enough at 7.
Yeah, you feel
to
like
watch
you're
that.
like an old soul in a
Yes.
little body. Like, yeah, I'm mature enough. Yeah.
I'm still in a little body though. So yeah, I started watching that when I was 7. And of course, and I also want to explain this or at least talk about it, is that my parents had no idea themselves about what was good and beautiful about sexuality, you know?
Because no one taught them.
No one taught them exactly. And so I can remember up until that point when no one's talking to you about sex in general or intertwined in that plan of love with God.
Yeah.
Then I just started watching these sex educators online. Whenever I was getting ready to go to school, my parents would put one of those daily shows that they play in the morning. And then they were bringing in this like guests that talk about sexuality and sex life. And they were saying that masturbation was good for kids, for self-exploring and self-care and all of those things that go around the discourse and the narrative of masturbation. And by the time I was 13, I was already practicing masturbation in a compulsive way.
Wow.
Like compulsive way.
Right. Yeah.
And when I was 16, I believe I was already addicted to masturbation because there are different stages of it. Like a really bad habit, like a vice, can become in terms of neurological patterns into compulsive behaviors. And then when you are so into that compulsive behavior, then you can develop addiction.
Wow.
Not everyone that practices masturbation is addicted to it, but in my case, I was. So I had this double life because I was so smart and I was going to court and I was working at this amazing law firm since first year of law school. And they always saw that I was always in place. But in the other hand, I was the party girl, like bad. So everything that goes around that life. So on the one hand, you're very smart and it's all about achievement and being good enough, especially as a woman in law, like in that universe. Right. But then going out partying, so I was the one drinking the most and started doing drugs as well. Like I would do social things, but then eventually it holds you like strong. And I started doing drugs, so drinking, and then I started reading about feminism and Simone de Beauvoir and many of these authors that are empowering women, right? And so I took it upon myself to just represent the fight for women in sexual freedom because I thought that was my field of expertise.
Even as an elementary school student, like I would watch like Oprah and I'd watch the guests that came on and you remember
Of course.
stuff they say, when... this stuff doesn't leave your mind. So you're thinking, oh yeah, this is what all the experts say. Like I have been doing this. Like I know at this point. Yeah.
And in the
I mean, if I were in that world, I'd come to you too. You know what I'm saying? Be like, tell me how to do, because whether you're seeking out wisdom when it's coming to, whether it's vice or virtue, people want to go to people who have wisdom in those, whether it's one way or the other. And even naturally, so if you had a charism of wisdom as a young person and you always felt like you were an old soul trapped in a little young body, which is, I feel like when people have that, that's probably a sign of a charism of wisdom, but you became wise in the ways of the world, right?
Exactly.
And so, you were the person people came to as like counsel.
It starts to become the internal setting on how you understand relationships, and not just sexual relationships, but emotional relationships intertwined with sex are regular, and then it becomes normal to you.
Oh, yeah. And then when you talk about chastity, oh my gosh, people are like, what?
Well, I've never heard the word chastity.
Okay. I've never heard the word chastity. Yeah.
Never in my life. But then intellectually, because you could say, well, she's impacted by the culture. But when you're reading these authors, like philosophy, like deep feminist philosophy and these narratives about women and how we've been oppressed by everything
Right, right.
in terms of traditional societies and values and the faith. So it was weird because up until that point, I thought that I had a good relationship with the Lord. Imagine.
Even as you were doing all that stuff, you thought, like,
Yes.
I have a good relationship. I'm good with God.
I'm good with God because I can,
Yeah.
you know, if someone dies, I can go to Mass. And I'm not killing anybody, even though I was pro-choice.
Yeah.
And I remember in school when once we were in class of civil rights, civil law, but we were talking about the some other like examples of debates, and they put the debate of the unborn. And then this girl stood up, and she was kind of close to me. We were not friends, but I knew her, and we had classes together. And then she stood up and she said that it was wrong, that an abortion was wrong because that was a life, and that having sex outside of marriage was wrong, and that using condoms was wrong. And I stood up in the middle of the class, and I was mad, I was upset. And I said to the teacher, it's outrageous that you let people like this study with us. She's an ignorant.
Oh my God.
That's what I said.
Wow.
She's an ignorant. You're talking about sin in a law class? Like, you should go read something and instruct yourself before you open your mouth. I was really mean to her.
Wow.
And I was pretty sure that there was no life in conception. I was absolutely certain. And that's why I was pro-choice. And so, of course, you have to be pro-choice when you are living and teaching this disordered sexual life, because there's no other consequence for having sex than bringing a life to being. So then if you want to back up this type of sexuality, then you have to back up abortion. There's no other way. And there's this like discourse that I hear a lot about, you know, don't do those things. Now, in terms of like Catholic faith and Catholic
So you would
based-
hear sometimes.
No,
like,
no,
don't-
now I think about it, like, don't do those things because those are nasty, those are bad, and they feel wrong. Well, my experience is that they don't feel wrong. They're actually pretty amazing in terms of like physical pleasure.
Right.
But maturing implies understanding the difference between what feels nice and what is actually good for you. I had no idea what that difference was.
There's an objective versus a subjective. The
Yes.
objective morality, objective truth versus just how I feel. But that's why we sin, is it feels good.
It feels good, yeah, but this
Right?
type
So
of...
if we let that drive our life, right? That's not to be driven by your feelings, your emotions, your pleasures, all that kind of stuff and it's not in line with objective goodness and truth and beauty.
Like the totalitarianism, I believe, of feelings, of emotion.
Totalitarian.
Yes. Totalitarian. I know, like the oppression of the feelings, you know?
Yeah.
You're oppressed
Get
by
into it.
this dictatorship of feelings.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Like when you do everything, that's what I thought, because it feels good, it must be good.
Yeah.
Sometimes doing what's right does not feel good necessarily.
Because love is sacrifice, and
it's tough.
it's painful.
It's painful, but not
Yeah.
not in a masochistic way. It's
Right.
painful in the terms like you're gonna be able to see the good and sense the good deep down, even if you're struggling. So whenever they say masturbation is wrong because it feels wrong, no, it does not feel wrong. And doing drugs does not feel wrong, and getting wasted does not feel wrong. It feels nice, but at what cost? And that's what I did not know, like the cost of my pleasure.
Well, and the thing is, it even says in the Catechism, like Pope Pius, I think the 12th said, God created pleasure.
Yes.
So the pleasure between a husband and a wife, that sexual, that pleasure between those two, it's good. We are not Puritans. We are not, there are some in Protestantism that believe pleasure is bad. You know, it's like, no, that's not what we believe as Catholics, but it always has to be within a context of the objectivity, right? The objective, especially the bonds of marriage. But you're right. Yeah. If you just base it on feelings, like, well, that doesn't feel bad.
Yes, and when
So it
you are
can't be bad.
bombarded with these narratives, specifically being a woman today,
Yeah.
it's really hard to escape the feminist lie that you're like battling other men, for example, or that you are battling this traditional conception of what femininity should be.
Yeah.
So I was not aware of the cost of my pleasure because I thought that I had an amazing life. You know, I was first in my law school class. I was making it. You know, I was
Yeah.
doing everything that I wanted to do. I was popular. And this is the thing, I was not brought up to actually desire marriage.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was not the kind of girl that dreamt about, one day having a house like this and getting married and having 5 kids. Like, that was to me the image of oppression
Right.
at its
Of
best.
course, the patriarchy.
The
How dare.
patriarchy, exactly. So
Because that's not free. And there in that world, it's not freedom.
It's not.
Right? You're chained down to a spouse. You're chained down to having children. That's not, to some people, that's not free.
And then the thing about that is that your life and your pleasure becomes your idol. And in order for God to actually enter your life, he needs to somehow remove your idols. And that's what he did with me. He knew that there was no way I was ever going to listen or even acknowledge him if I was still worshiping my idols. So he took them hard. Like, it was...
Yeah, so what happened?
My dad went in bankruptcy. There was this crisis in my country in 2016. And my dad lost his job. And I remember I was in law school class in constitutional law. And with this teacher, no one passed. Like, he was tough. And I was doing my exam, like midterm exam, I guess, on constitutional law. And I got a 6 out of... I got 5 out of 5. Okay. So it was like, she did it. Like, she nailed it. I was walking around. I got out of the class with my exam, like, pasted in my face. I did not walk. I levitated.
Right.
And then my dad called me at that same moment, and he said, look, I did a payment arrangement with the university, but I haven't been able to tell you that I can't keep up with it, and they just suspended your classes.
Oh, wow.
So that exam that I just passed means nothing. Like, and my entire universe just broke. Like, my friends, I wasn't going to be able to graduate with them. I had no idea how bad this situation was because my dad tried to protect me from the truth, which is not actually something you do.
Yeah.
But everything went down this, like, black and dark path in my life. I had no idea if I was ever going to be able to go back to school. My dad had no job. My parents were fighting all the time, and I was locked up in my room. I was so ashamed. I did not tell my friends. These are your real friends.
So after your midterms, you couldn't go back?
I couldn't go back.
So what year of school were you at this point?
I was in my 2nd year of law school.
Okay.
I was finishing my 2nd year of law school. I was about to go. Is it that in Latin America we don't have years? We do semesters. So I was in my 4th semester of law school.
But was that after, did you already do like 4 years of university and then go to law school?
No.
Or was this is like you're 19 or 20 at this point?
Yes, I'm 18.
Oh, you're 18. Okay.
I'm 18, but we don't do the university college thing. We go straight to law school.
Okay.
So I just started, I think I had like a moment of depression. Like, I did not leave my room. I only used to do drugs, like, casually at parties. I started using every day to avoid being waken up and, like, facing the reality of what was happening.
Like, what kind of drugs were you
using? Weed and, pills.
Okay.
And ecstasy. Thank God I never did, like, heroin or cocaine or any of those things. Probably I would still be hooked up on those things. But, weed and pills to avoid being waken up. And one day, I had a cousin that lived across the street from me. Like, literally across the street. I just needed to walk to her house. And she said, I remember I was the previous vacations, I was at the beach in this paradise, like tropical paradise in Colombia. We were with many friends. I don't remember half of it. I was so wasted, and I was bad at that point. I do not remember most of it, but I remember laying in the beach and she telling me about this prayer group at her house that her mom was, organizing. I was like, sure, I'm good with Jesus, right? I can go pray sometimes.
I love it.
And she was like, yes, but it's Friday nights. And I was like, there's no way.
That's party night.
That's party night. There's no way I'm going to pray on a Friday night. So I forgot all about that invitation. And that was right before I went into the semester that I couldn't finish. So it was right before. The Lord was just letting me know in advance.
Kind of putting the foot in the door.
Yes.
Yep.
And then when I had to drop out of college, then one Friday, I was so depressed in my room. And my cousin texted me. And she was like, we are having the prayer group tonight. And the thing about cultural faith, if you could call it that, is that you don't have a relationship with the Lord, but you kind of know about him. And I knew about Mary growing up. And I had this little like drawing of Mary that I had done when I was a kid. And I kept that in my wallet. And I always remember I'm really close to my aunt. She raised me, basically. So I always said, I have my mom, like my biological mom that I love, and my aunt, and Mary. Like, I have 3 mothers. And I used to repeat that all the time. No rosary, no devotion life, no virtue, but she's my mom, right? And so when my cousin invited me that night, I went to Mary. Like, I remembered Mary. And I said, okay, look, sex does not help. Drugs are not helping. Alcohol is not helping. Masturbation is not helping. Porn is not helping. Maybe your son can help me. And I asked Mary, like, please help me go to this group because I don't want to go. But if you want me there, then I'll go.
You kind of just realized none of this stuff was making you happy.
No, like in the moment I needed the most, not even my friends were there. I was by myself with all this pleasure, but very miserable. And I was experiencing pleasure, but I was so miserable. And I was like, this makes no sense. This was supposed to make me happy.
Oh yeah, everyone tells you have more sex,
Right.
do all the pleasure in the world. That'll satisfy you, right? That'll fulfill
Right.
your desires. No. Yeah.
And so I walked to her place, and it was this charismatic prayer group. I've never been to any place like that, just the mass, and that's it. And they had their lights turned off, and it was a lay minister that was Catholic that was just praying around. And then whenever I got in, I saw people praying with candles, and I was like, what is this? I was very suspicious always because I'm very rational in that way. Then he came to me as if he was Jesus. He started talking to me as if he was Jesus.
Was he getting like words of knowledge for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Words of knowledge, yes. And the first thing he said was like, finally, I've been waiting for you for so long.
Wow.
And he started saying things that no one knew about me.
My friend Kim says he started reading your mail.
He did.
Yeah. Because when people get words of knowledge from the Lord, you're like, wait, how did you know that?
Right. But what I thought, my lawyer brain, the first thing I thought to myself was like, either he's a witch or he just scams people. He just like he's trying to throw things at me in case that they...
I thought you were thinking like my cousin must have told him.
No. I went like, they're just lying to me because my cousin did not, no one knew that that I had dropped out of school. Like I was so ashamed that my identity relied on those things. So I was not ready to tell anybody. No one knew.
Okay.
And so he left and I was like, it's a bummer that he's lying to me, because he said, I love you in a way that I've never heard before. And I love you, like really, he trespassed me. And I thought, it's a shame that it's a lie. I wish it was true. Like, I wish God existed and I wish God was Jesus. Because at that point, I've been searching through Buddhism and many other things. Like, is it Allah? Is it Siddhartha Gautama? Who is God? At that point, I was like, well, it would be nice if it was actually Jesus.
Yeah.
And that he loved me.
Yeah.
And I remember Mary. And I felt her. Like, it was not something about, I smelled roses, and it was not something extraordinary. It was just a certainty. I had the certainty that Mary was behind me with her hands in here. And I went to her and I said in my mind, okay, look, if this is real, if your son exists, well, if God exists first, and if God is your son, and if he loves me, please talk to me, because I need help. And that's what Jesus needs. He only needs 1 minute of vulnerability.
Yeah, just like a little crack of openness,
Exactly.
right? That heart that just needs just a little openness, and he's like, okay, cool, it's time.
Yes, and that's what I just laid down my weapons, and I was like, I need help. And I remember those words.
Yeah.
I need help, and if he can help me, talk to me. And I said that in my mind. And the leader of the group, he came back to me. And he said, in that exact moment, my mom, the Virgin Mary, is talking to me about you right now. In the exact moment I asked her to talk to me.
Wow.
And I broke down. Like, I cried like I never cried before until that point. Started just sobbing in front of everybody. And I never did that. And I went home thinking, I must have taken or smoked something really heavy. Because I just talked to Mary.
Yeah. Like,
and Jesus. And
what am I on?
What am I on? Like, I could not believe that. So for a while, I just went to the group every Friday night. But I had no sense of morality. So I would go to the group and then smoke weed, or then go to the group and then go partying. And it amazes me how Jesus goes step by step with you, baby steps.
Yeah, it meets you where you're at.
He met me where I was, and
Yeah.
he still does. But if he had told me everything that I would be, like if he had said to me that night, you're gonna end up preaching theology of the body and being the chastity girl
In the country of Colombia.
in the country of Colombia, and you're gonna drop out of law school and you're gonna do theology later and philosophy, I would have ran out so fast.
Of course you would have. Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up going eventually every Friday night. And then one day they said that we needed to pray the Bible. I didn't have a Bible at home. So I picked up an old, dusty, huge Bible that my grandmother left.
It's like your family Bible. Yeah,
the family Bible.
Really nice.
The huge one. I opened it up, and the first thing I read was Leviticus. Do not recommend.
Yeah. You're like, oh, Genesis, Exodus, cool. Leviticus, what the?
What? So I read that. That was the first thing I read in the Bible. And I was like, well, if all of this is true, I'm going to hell. That was my conclusion. Like, if it's actually the word of God,
Yeah.
I'm doing every single thing in here that says I shouldn't be doing. But at that point, I was so exhausted of regular, like, sinful life. That was like, I'm in. I've done worse. Like, I've followed other leaders. I've done everything the world has taught me to do.
Yeah.
Well, if this is Jesus, then I'm going to obey.
Yep.
And I threw all of my such, like everything that I had, all of my drugs, all of my vibrators, everything went down the toilet, and the vibrators went to the trash. But then I realized the sin was not outside of me. That's what St. Paul says, right?
Yeah.
The sin was in me, especially sexual sin. And I could not get free from sexual, like, it was so, like, I was enslaved, and I could feel the chains in me. So I started going to Mass, and I started going to the Holy Sacrament. I remember that the group leader once, he said, you need to go to the Holy Sacrament and do adoration for 30 minutes every day. And I was, I need to go where?
You're like, what's that?
What is that? So they instructed me to go to this little chapel, and I was like, this is like, people just stare at a wall and a piece of bread, like basically a cracker. They're adoring a cracker. This is what we're doing. Okay, I've done worse. Like, what I kept thinking all the time was like, I've done worse. Like,
Wow.
I've done worse. I'm just gonna adore a cracker. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then I started having this deep relationship with Christ, with the cracker. That's what I thought.
With the cracker.
Honestly. And then
Which, again, as Catholics, we're either completely insane that we believe a piece of bread becomes the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, or we're actually right. We are either the worst idolaters and we are adoring a cracker, a piece of bread. Or it actually is Jesus. There's no middle ground.
There's no
We are either the worst idolaters or it's real. And Jesus is who he says he is.
And by obedience, I went every day.
Wow.
But I felt nothing. I fell asleep. I remember I woke up because my neck was hurting so bad because I was falling asleep. And then one day I turned around and there was no one there. And there are no words, because if you've never lived that experience, there are no words that can explain that. But somehow the gift of faith was granted to me to see that that was Jesus. And I went in thinking I was going to adore the bread, the piece of cracker, and then I left with this certainty that he was alive and that he was there.
Yeah.
And I felt so loved that I couldn't help but just go every day. Like, I needed to feel him again.
Yeah.
And that's why there is no argument that can help you get there. Like, you can understand many things in here, in theory, but the experience of feeling loved by him, you have to show up. Even if you're in a part of your life when you're just not sure, or if you don't feel necessarily that it makes sense. No, it does not make sense, because love makes no sense.
Yeah, you can know all the theology, all the philosophy. You can know how to defend the faith. You can know all that stuff. And if it doesn't seep into your heart and you don't have that internal encounter with Jesus, that transformation, I mean, imitation of Christ. He talks about that a lot.
Yes.
Like, you can know how to talk about the Trinity, but if you don't know the Trinity, oof.
And at that point, I had no idea about anything regarding theology.
Except for what you learn, maybe, growing up, and you kind of know a little bit about that.
Yes, but not at all. Like, it's weird to me that I've never been to adoration in my entire life. That they said the Holy Sacrament, and I was like, the Holy what? So it was weird, but then I was able to experience that faith is actually a gift. You cannot make yourself believe in something. You just have to open up your heart and show up. So that's what I did. I showed up, and then they were like assigning saints for each one of us in the group. And mine was St. Francis of Assisi. Blech, I hated him.
Wait, St. Francis of Assisi?
Assisi. Okay. Yeah, sorry. St. Francis of Assisi. Okay. So mine was St. Francis of Assisi, and I started...
You didn't like him? How come?
What do you mean?
You didn't like him?
No, because they actually assigned this saint to me, St. Francis of Assisi, and I went home and I started reading about him, and I was so vain. You can see I'm still a little vain, but I was so vain. And everything in my world was about money, about being successful. And then I started reading about this guy talking about Lady Poverty. I was like, no, Jesus. I've done many things, not this. Yeah. I hated him. I did not like St. Francis. Now we're pals. But at that moment, I did not like him. Yeah. So I was like, no, if this is what it takes to follow Jesus, I'm not in for this. Wow. But it was a Google website of all the Franciscan saints in history. And guess what? The second saint below St. Francis in that website was Padre Pio. And that old man changed my life. I started reading about Padre Pio and all the letters he wrote and the apparitions that he had. And it hit me like Jesus is the Jesus of Padre Pio. And there was no doubt in my mind that that old man was alive. And I had no one to talk to. Like I had no one to ask about the Lord or about the faith. My parents thought that I was just going through a phase, you know? I had the rebellious phase and I had the hippie phase, and then I cut my hair like Joan Jett for my rock and roll phase. So they were like, she's going through her Christian phase. It's gonna like eventually she's gonna get tired of it. Yeah. And
but Padre Pio, you watch out. He can follow you, man. Yeah, he's our dude.
Incredible.
We love you, Padre Pio.
We love you. And I started writing letters to him because I read that he was a spiritual director, that he promised to always be there for his spiritual kids. So I started writing, and I still have the first letter I wrote to him. I was 19 at that point. And I wrote, look, I think I'm going to hell because it says in Leviticus that I'm going to hell. And I don't want to go there. Yeah. But I have no one to help me. And I need you to please be my spiritual director and help me love Jesus. I just want to love Jesus and I want to do what's right. So please help me because it's hard. And I just wrote everything that I was struggling with. Wow. And then a week later, I ended up leaving the charismatic group, but because there was no one my age. And then at the parish where I started doing adoration, there was a youth group. Not the kids that I would have ever thought I would be hanging with. I remember thinking, please, God, that no one sees me hanging with them in the church. Like, honestly, I did not want to be seen with them. Yeah. And now they are my best friends. Like, those kids are now the best friends that the Lord could have given me. But in the beginning, when I first met them, I was not really nice about them. And I started going there, and one of them had been actually a novice.
A novice
At a Franciscan Friars of the Renewal,
really?
But the ones that come from Italy. Not the ones you have in America,
okay.
But the branch that comes from Italy, and they founded a house in Colombia and Africa.
Okay.
So one of them one day saw that I was, having things in my Bible about Padre Pio and stuff. He said, you want to go meet a priest that lived with Padre Pio?
Capuchins. Yeah.
But these are, these are not Capuchins. These are the renewal, like the renovation.
Another, okay.
Right.
No, yeah, Franciscans have a lot of.
Yes, the minors, they have many,
Conventual,
right?
TORs,
exactly.
The CFRs, the Capuchin. Yeah, there's a lot of
This is like the CFRs, but in Colombia.
Okay.
And so I went there because he promised that there was a priest that met Padre Pio, that lived with Padre Pio. And he was right. There was this Franciscan friar, Italian. He was a Capuchin, but he entered the monastery when he was 11, and he lived with Padre Pio in Italy. Gosh. And so you can imagine the holiness in the man. He is just a very holy man. And I remember I went in and I did my first live confession, and he would just cry when he heard me. He started crying and he held me and he said, I'm so sorry that you had to go through so many things being so young, because you say that you grew up in a different environment. He could not believe everything I was telling him.
Yeah.
And then I just fell in love with religious life. Like, this was the monastery where they received the novices. Like before, like the kids that were interested in discerning vocation.
Okay.
So I was seeing guys that were actually good looking, young.
God takes a lot of good looking ones. I'm just
Yes,
saying.
please, God, stop.
Gotta save some for the single ladies,
Yes,
Lord.
please, Lord. So they were like good looking and they were my age. I had money. I was able to have sex or experience physical pleasure in that matter, like in that sense.
Yeah.
And I could do whatever I wanted, right? They had no money. They were making a vow of poverty.
Yeah.
They could not do whatever they wanted. They had to
They're not having
abide
sex,
by
that's for sure.
obedience.
Yeah.
And they are not having sex. They're never going to have sex. That was something that I could not understand. So they're
Yeah.
never having sex in their lives.
And guess what? Were they happy?
They were more happy than I was. And the word that kept coming to mind is, how come you feel so much freedom? And I have all of these things. And I feel enslaved.
Wow.
Why? How does that work? And then something happened. I was able to go back to law school for the next semester. And then it just didn't make sense anymore. So I was in class learning about constitutional law or something. And was like, I don't think I want to keep doing this for the rest of my life. And I love law school and I love what I could do with it. But I just want to be a friar. That's what kept coming to mind. Like, now I'm learning all of these things for the world.
Yeah.
And they're just praying and, barefoot in the hills, praising the Lord. And I was like, I want that. So I started skipping class. Like, I would say that I was going to class and I would take 2 buses to go to the monastery, like
So now
far
you're
away.
doing the opposite of like rebellion. Now you're going to pray.
Yes. And I just went. You know what I mean? They adopted me. I was like the pet of the monastery. And they would teach me how to do rosaries, embroidered rosaries. And I spent all my time with them. And they became my friends. I was like, can I please stay? Can I do a retreat? And they were like, no, you're a lady. We don't take ladies in. I'm so
We
sorry.
don't take the ladies. Yeah.
I was like, I can just put up a tent outside of the monastery. And I kept insisting for so long until they said, look, there are a bunch of other women that had the same idea as you. And they opened up a monastery. They wear the same habit that we do. They have our same constitution. So I was like, I didn't grow up seeing lots of nuns. Like, they were not in my mind.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
At all. I've never seen one. But I've read about a few of them, like Saint Therese of Lisieux and many of the saints. And I was like, not appealing. I'm sorry. I don't see myself as a nun.
Yeah.
I want to be a friar. That's what I kept saying. Like, I want to be a friar. He said to me, I remember Fray Francisco, and he said, no, they also wanted to be friars, believe me. That was their thing, and they're doing something like that, so just go call them. And I did. I called them up, and I was like, hey, hello. I've read up until that point, because remember, going back a little bit, I did not grow up wanting to get married and stuff. But I started reading about these religious sisters, and Saint Faustina, she's also my godmother in the faith. She was the first woman that I read about. And I remember there was one time when Jesus said to her, your spouse loves you. And something stirred deep inside of me. I was like, how come I have to settle for an imperfect man, a flawed man, and she gets to hear from you? Your spouse loves you. How is that possible? Like, I could not fathom Jesus loving everyone the same. And I started fighting Jesus. I was mad at him. Like, you don't love everyone the same. You want me to settle, and you gave them everything because they had the best spouse. And then I started just wondering about, like, this spousal relationship with Jesus and what it meant to be called. And at that moment, I thought he was calling me to be a religious sister. Like, in time, I started discerning that.
Yeah.
So when the time came to call the sisters, I was like, yes, so I'm marrying Jesus, and I need to know if it's with you. Just let me know, when can I go? And he was in a different town. I had to, take a plane to go.
Wow.
So I did that. I went for a weekend, and then I went for a month, and then a weekend, a week, and a month. And I told my parents I was doing retreats.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the end of
Because
the last one,
that would freak them out less than if you said, I'm going to go visit the nuns and see if I should be
Right.
Jesus' spouse.
Jesus' spouse, for parents that do not practice the faith at all.
Yes, yeah.
And so I did that, and then they said, we can see that the Lord is calling you to something, and this is a place where you can discern that. And they gave me a date to enter the monastery. But you know, Franciscan constitutions, or the rule of the Franciscan life, you have to leave everything. So I went back home, and then my dad was in the living room one day, and then there's kids that live in the street, walk in the front door, and they went out with my bed, with my sheets, with my clothes, and my dad was like, what is going on? Like, they're taking everything. I was like, yes, because the scripture says that you have to give everything to the poor and then go follow him. So that's what I'm doing. Dad, you need to...
Your dad's like, what is happening?
Yes, for my parents, it was really tough because
my
I was like, I'm dropping out of law school for real, and I'm
Wow.
going to do discernment. So I did. It was really tough on them. It was like a movie.
How long did you discern with them for?
2 years.
Wow. And you lived at
I
with
lived in the
sisters,
monastery for 2 years. It was tough because they did everything with their hands. They did not have an oven.
Yeah. Really? They have an oven?
They don't have an oven.
How, just over a open fire? What they,
Yes.
Really?
They have a specific, like a very specific oven that works with fire.
Oh
like
my
with
gosh, like a pizza oven
wood,
almost.
like a pizza
Yeah,
oven.
like a wood burning stove.
A wood
kinda
burning
oven.
stove. That's
Wow,
it. They don't
wow.
have a freezer.
I
like a
need to go
freezer.
there and learn how to do that.
They don't have a freezer. They don't have
Wow.
ice. They don't have cell phones or internet.
Yeah.
They don't have anything, and you had to do everything with your hands. And I just dropped out of law school. I barely know how to boil water. And I had to cook for 23 sisters.
Oh my goodness.
They used to laugh all the time. Like, I for sure gave the sisters 2 years of a lot of amusement.
You're like the Colombian Kim Kardashian. Like, that's what you are. You're like, I went to law school and I don't know how to boil
I don't know
water.
anything.
Yeah, you're like,
But I look good at it.
I like good doing it.
I look good
Oh
doing
my
it.
gosh, I
Yes.
love this.
And they just adopted me as one of their own.
Oh
And I
my
love my
gosh.
sisters so much.
Yes.
But it was tough. Of course it was tough. Like you just a drastic change, you know?
Yeah.
When you meet the Lord, people like me with personalities like mine, like all or nothing personalities,
Yeah.
we end up making these tough decisions that sometimes are not so healthy for us in the
Yeah.
spiritual life. The Lord walks with you, but still, there are decisions that we romanticize too much. And it was tough, like to be in silence for 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it was the most amazing.
I mean, parents dream of that now. We're like, please give me 24 hours of silence.
Give me just 1 hour of silence, I'll take it. But yeah, it was the most fruitful life experience for me in terms of my encounter with Christ and my relationship with the Lord.
Wow.
Because I used to sleep a lot before, and then in here I was asking permission to stay up until 1 a.m. The sisters wake up at 1 a.m. to do the office of the liturgy of the hours.
There's the hours, yeah.
And then the first prayer they do at 1 a.m. and they stay in adoration to do like reparation. How do you say that in English?
Reparation? Is that what you
Reparation?
mean? Yeah.
Yes, from 1 to 2 a.m. Then they go back to sleep, and then they wake up at 5 to do the rest of the prayers. And then,
Gosh.
so I would stay up since 9 p.m. until 1 almost every day with the Lord, like the
Wow.
Holy Sacrament. That, let me tell you, that changes your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like deep down, something changed in me, and maturity starts setting in when you have the right environment. And I think that's what the Lord wanted me to experience. But then I wanted to study so bad, like because I've always been an intellectual, so I wanted to know my theology.
Right.
And it was not part of the charisma. You know, it's not that not all nuns study, but this specific charisma is not their thing
Their
to go to
charism.
college.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yes.
their charism to do that kind of study. Yeah.
And I remember when we went, their charisma was to help clean up places of adoration. Because St. Francis said you have to be the lowest of the
Right,
low, you
right.
know? So we would go to the seminary, and I would see the seminarians having classes on Bible studies and stuff. And I would tear up, like, Jesus, I want this so bad. And the devil kept, like, working me on this feminist thing. Like, why do priests get to do this? Why is it always men that have the good things? Even in the church.
Yeah.
Like, they can be friars. I cannot. They can go to the seminary. Like, I would have loved to be a priest. That's what I said. Like, I want to be a priest so bad. And I want to do theology. And but I can't because I'm a woman. And there's a huge lie in there. But in the moment, I did not understand it.
Yeah.
So I left the monastery in really good terms with my sisters. I visit every year. And I decided to go to law school, go to my same university, but switch careers. So I did not finish law school. I ended up doing theology.
Wow. Yeah.
And philosophy. And that's what I'm currently doing because
Yeah.
it's long. Like, you have to do 2.5 years of philosophy and then 3.5 years of theology. But it's been amazing, amazing. And during the pandemic, someone sent me, I started preaching, like, not because I wanted it, like, the priest in my parish asked me to preach to the youth and then to married couples. And I just did that in my parish. Like,
And were you sharing your testimony, or were you sharing about the faith?
about the faith in general, about the catechism and about the gospels. And I would have like Bible study classes with them because I was learning by myself and because I was already doing theology in school. So
But you're a reader and you're an intellectual and you like learning. So
right. So I was
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
And then someone sent me this email about an online congress for something called Theology of the Body. I've never heard that. In Latin America, let me tell you, that is not a thing at all. Like, I've talked to lots of priests and bishops that have never heard of Theology of the Body.
Wow. Wow.
So someone sent me this link of a free online conference. And I remember I was doing the chores at home because I was back at my parents' house. And it was my turn to wash the bathroom that day. So I was in the shower, covered up in soap, listening to the first introduction lection or a conference. And it was Christopher West talking about Theology of the Body. And I started just crying because it was... in my feminine heart, I always felt like there was no place for me. Like, I want to be in the monastery with the friars. No, it's not your place. But then I wanted to go to the nuns. But I felt like, no, this is not your
Still
place.
wasn't a fit for you. Yeah.
Right. And the seminary where I was studying and at home, all of my classmates are seminarians. So somehow you feel this is not your place. The first time I heard about Theology of the Body, a voice deep down in me said, this is your place within the church.
Wow.
And it was so, I still remember that day and that feeling whenever the ministry gets hard. Like, this is my place.
Yeah.
And it's my place because I've never, in all of the theology that I had studied up until that point and all the Bible study lessons that I've taken, such the good news of free sexual love as God intended it to be, and God's plan for human pleasure and for human flourishing within human love.
Yeah.
And how that it's like the platform where you go to Jesus.
It names your desires. That's
Right.
That's the beautiful thing. It's like we all, as humans, we all have these desires. And I feel like so many of us who have learned theology of the body, we're like, oh my gosh, this names exactly what I've been longing for, yearning for, but in such a beautiful way, because the culture gives you one way and you know that it doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to slavery, and slavery of sin and right? It just, your whole testimony, you were like, I didn't experience that. And so it's finally naming something that you're like, yes, this is.
And it's good.
Yeah, and it's beautiful.
It is, because what I thought was like, okay, I went to this other side, like what he calls like this diet, where you just have everything you want. And
The fast food diet.
The fast food
yeah.
diet. I experienced that. But then when I was in the monastery, all of my struggles with masturbation and pornography, they were muted. So I thought that I was completely healed. And it was not that. It was just that the Lord was having so much mercy with me that if I had been struggling with vocation and discernment and baking in those types of ovens while struggling with my sexual sins, I would have gone crazy.
So, so he talks about going to the fast food and then going to starvation.
Starvation. So
And you're repressing those desires.
I thought that was the virtuous way, repressing it.
And a lot of people do.
Yes. And
Even a lot of Catholics do. They
leave there.
They don't go
there.
further. And the further thing is the the integration of those desires, right?
To open up the desires to the only one
Right.
that can fulfill them.
The untwisting of those desires.
The untwisting, but I
Yeah.
was so afraid because I had no guidance. I thought that was just going to lead me back to sin and the
Yeah.
fast food diet. So for a long time, and I'm telling you, about 3 or 4 years after I left the monastery, I stayed in the repressive state of mind. We don't think about that. We don't talk about that. That is sinful. Even just thinking about the word sex is sinful. I went the other way.
Yep.
And I was not free
Which
either.
oftentimes, again, when you have a conversion, that's what happens. It's like you go so far the other way, which I did that too in my own conversion. You go so far towards that repressive versus that integration and that allowing Jesus to come into those desires and purify them.
But the thing is that when you are so uptight, it's going to break you somehow. So
that's true.
when
Yeah.
I was in that starvation diet, I started sinning again, but knowing the Lord, and that's painful.
Yeah.
When you know
Yeah.
you go back to masturbation because you can't be free of it. And I remember I used to have confession and then go to mass, and then I would get home and I would fall again in masturbation, crying while I was like, I don't want to do this, but I can't control myself.
And I think that the culture looks at Christians and thinks that's what we do.
Yes.
Oh, you guys go to church. If you're Catholic, you go to mass, you go to confession, and look, you just fall again. Like, so you guys are just a bunch of hypocrites. Like, you guys don't really have freedom because it's still that repression.
And because what you preach is not true. Because if it was true, then you would be able to have a grip on yourself and own yourself.
Right.
And I thought maybe I'm just a hypocrite and maybe I'm just not good at living virtuous life. But then in that, that was the environment, like the internal environment I was going through when I heard Christopher West for the first time. And he was like, this is it. Like, I'm not crazy. And there is a way for
It's possible.
It is possible. And my sexual sin is actually going to meet the Lord's mercy in a way that makes me feel freedom for the first time in 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I dived into it. And you know what was one of the first talks of that online conference that I saw?
Me and Bobby.
Yes. You too. And it was amazing. Like I saw it all, and then I started doing the Theology of the Body courses. And then I was studying theology and then doing a theology of the body. And then I got another certification in sexual healing. And then I met the John Paul II Healing Institute with Bob Schutz. And then I started, having formation in what actually moved me. And it's not just something you learn to give to others, but I was learning to heal myself.
Because you're not just dealing with the fruit of the sin, which often as Catholics, and we've talked about this with my friend Kim Zember, is like we often just deal with the fruit and we go to confession, we cut the fruit off, and we never go to the root, which is so much deeper. And it's like a weed. If you just cut the top of a weed off, we all know what happens. It grows right back. But you have to get a weed by its root. You have to pull it out by its root. And so the root of those sins goes so much deeper. And that's what the beauty of Bob Schutz and what he does, the beauty of Theology of the Body and God's grace. It's like you're going to the root of our desires. What are we ultimately desiring? And oftentimes it's not just pleasure. It's we want to be loved. We want to be known. We want to be seen. And that shame... Again, the shame makes us think that we're bad and dirty and ugly and we're not, we're damaged goods or whatever. And that unfortunately propels you to more shame instead of knowing our belovedness and how good we are. Because when you really know that and when you really believe it, it's like that sin, it's like you don't even want to. You're like, no, I don't even want to go to that. Like that doesn't even bring me happiness.
It's not enough anymore.
No, it's not enough. And St. Francis of Assisi said, God is enough. St. Teresa of Avila said that too. God is enough. Do we believe that? God actually is enough. And I would say too, we have a lot of young singles who follow us too. And how old are you now?
I'm 29.
Okay, you're 29 and you're single.
Yes,
and
recently.
Yeah. Okay. All right, gentlemen, ladies, if you're listening, get your brothers and your cousins.
Please do.
And tell them the Kim Kardashian of Colombia, but a holy, very holy version is single. Okay. I love setting people up. Sorry.
Okay.
So my question to you is, and to give encouragement to all the other single ladies, is how do you, even though you do have this ache and longing to be married, how do you have joy? Is God actually enough?
Well, yeah, I think because of the wounds that we have, sometimes it's a barrier to experiencing how much God is enough. And because we're never fully healed, there's always the temptation to go back and satisfy our deepest desires in the immediate.
With something else.
With something else. So when I know that a lot of people that get to know theology of the body and to study the healing of the whole person kind of retreats and this thing, they kind of wanted to help others or to stop doing sinful things. Like, I need to stop this, or I need to stop longing for a husband, or I need to stop longing to be with someone so that I can feel what I have to feel, so that I can be what I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
But going into the deep, as you said, like finding the root of things, it takes time.
Yep.
And it's painful. And in my ministry, because I started a Theology of the Body ministry, and it grew up like huge in Latin America, and that's what I do. Like, most of it, like, I'm either studying in classroom, like in theology classes, or I'm preaching everywhere and taking a plane to go preach to another place. And this is what I've encountered. The temptation, like the most excruciatingly painful temptation in the single stage of your life, is that you think if you find someone, the ache is going to go away.
Yep.
That if I find someone, he's finally going to fulfill me. And guess what? I work with married couples. And the most recurring phrase or sentence that I hear from them, married people, that on the outside they have these amazing Catholic marriages, and they say, I feel lonely.
But even I'm married to the man of my dreams, my best friend, and I still have that ache for God, because Bobby is not God.
And he's never going to fulfill you.
He's never going to be.
Thank God he's never going to fulfill you.
Yeah, and I'm not God either. And so we both are leading each other to Jesus, because he's the only one that satisfies.
And so discerning your vocation, because I believe the world that we live in is romanticizing love in a way that it's setting you up to think if you don't get married, or if that's not your vocation, then you're a failure.
Yep.
And that
We
you're not
idolize
lovable.
romantic love, and we idolize sexual love, thinking that that is the only form of intimacy.
And that is the only form of love you're called to. And that's why I think most Catholic women are afraid of asking the question, Lord, and what if?
Oh, girl, you go there. You go there. What if?
What if you're not calling me to marriage?
Ooh.
Am I going to be less loved? Am I going to be deprived of loving the way I want to? Am I going to be a failure to you? Because deep down, what it's behind that is you don't feel like the Lord is enough for you.
I mean, and the thought you could be calling me to be your bride, Jesus.
Your bride in the world, or your bride in monastery, or consecrate my life to you. And what I've come to realize, working with the youth and working with so many people, and also with myself, because, I was single I never dated when I was in the world. Emotional relationships, I was terrified of that. So the feminist narrative suited me perfectly, because I did not have to give anything up for anyone.
Yeah.
But then when I was in the monastery, of course, I was not dating anybody. And when I left, when I was in the starvation diet, I was not dating anybody. And just recently, around 3 years ago, I said to the Lord, okay, then I'm going to be up for dating. I'm going to try. What if you're calling me to marriage? And I was terrified about that. What if you're calling me to marriage? And God allowed me to meet this amazing man. He's my ex-boyfriend. And we just broke it off around a month ago. We broke up. But it was the first time I had a serious relationship where I was loved, where he was actually able and willing to say no to himself, to work in chastity with me. And I had that experience. I never thought that it was possible, and it was so healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was not for me. We were able to discern that God was not calling him to be my husband, and I was not being called to be his wife.
Yeah.
But we are still friends. I never thought that was possible.
Wow.
To break up, praying with someone, this is the Lord's will. I love you too, but I need to give you up because there is a higher will for both of us.
Yeah.
I always thought that having an ex would be this dramatic thing. I don't talk about my ex. And the Lord has its ways of giving you exactly what you need. And now that I'm single, of course, and I'm turning 30 this year, I get you. If you're there, I get you. I'm 30, I'm not getting married, I'm not having kids, and then you come to Jackie's house, and she has an amazing husband, and she has a beautiful 5 kids, and it's Lord, seriously, I get it. It's okay to feel that. It's not okay to stay there, But it's okay to actually
Yeah.
pray about what's behind that desire of mine.
Well, and you are going to desire that. Again, the desires are good. Feelings aren't bad, yeah. And I think it gives you hope. I know for me, when I was single, I would meet beautiful families. I'm like, okay, I have hope. Like, it's possible.
It's possible.
Because I was 29 when I got married. I was 30 when we had our first kid. And but for me, when I was single, I just was like, Lord, you need to bring me like holy marriages and holy moms and dads to show me what it looks like to have a Catholic family. Because I don't even know if it's possible. And God did. He showed me. So it always gave me hope. It gave me hope, like, okay, it is possible, Lord, whatever your will is for me. I know that good men are out there. Good-looking men are out there.
Good-looking men that are from Texas. I'm loving Texas, by the way.
And they're not all just going to be priests, Lord. You need to keep some for the ladies. Okay.
Please, Lord. But yeah, what it goes down to, I believe, if by any chance the Lord is not calling me to marriage, if I accept that with confidence that my Father, God my Father, is not going to give me a vocation that is not making me happy, then you have to go deep down into your wounds and understand, ask the Lord to show you why is it that you don't trust God.
Oof.
Because in the end, your vocation is just a response to a loving call from your Father that wants to make you as happy as you can. And if your vocation is not marriage, then it means you're not going to be happy in there, as happy as you can in your actual vocation. And that in your specific calling, the Lord knows and is able to fulfill you so that you can walk to Him and be with Him, because we underestimate how short life is. And that the only purpose of living this life is to go and walk a bit closer to the only spouse that is going to fulfill you. And I know for a fact that if you were ready right now to have a relationship, you would. I've come to notice that maybe the Lord hasn't given me the friends I wanted at some point. Like, I want Catholic friends, like the ones that live their faith in America. We don't have that in Colombia. Like, there are not many lay women preaching or ministries. That's not a thing in there. Yeah. So I was, Lord, can you please give me Catholic friends? Can you please give me a Catholic boyfriend from Texas? Lord, can you please give me all these human relationships that I want? And now I know that at the moment, in the time when I was asking for it, I could have idolized those. They would have become my idol because I was looking for the Lord in the wrong places and in the wrong way. When your heart is free to accept whatever it is that the Lord wants, because He is my gift, He is my treasure, it doesn't get better than this. Having Him, then you can love freely your friends and your spouse and your boyfriend. And that is not something that you can force. You have to go through the painful process of knowing yourself and knowing what are the wounds that are laying beneath all of my good desires that are making me look in the wrong places. So that would be my advice.
Yeah. And I do know people, I know women who are in their 40s. I actually have two friends who are in their 50s that just got engaged. And I was like, my always saying to myself when I was single, I was like, the longer you wait, the better he'll be. Because had I met Bobby when we were in college, oh my gosh, we would not have been compatible. Like, we were at such different places. Like, God brought us at the time. And so I know, like, I was always like, okay, if He's growing in holiness, I'm growing in holiness, then the longer I wait, the better He'll be.
Yes.
Like, I had that hope, you know. You and I could talk forever.
Forever.
We're going to continue talking after this. But anyway, where can people find you to follow you, to see your ministry?
Sure. We are in Instagram. It's called Somos Suyos. It's from Psalm 99.
Okay.
He made us, we are His. So that's the translation. Somos Suyos.
And we'll put that in the show notes too.
Yes.
We'll put your
so
Instagram
at
handle.
somos.sos.
Yeah.
And on YouTube, it's just Somos Suyos. And we do Spanish, like mainly Spanish ministry, but I also do English ministry sometimes when needed.
Yeah. Well,
that's it.
I am so grateful for you for sharing your testimony with such honesty, and the world needs that, because this is where the world is for sure. So thank you so much
for having
joining
me, Jackie.
me, and
It's a
we're going to keep
pleasure.
talking. For you guys though, thank you for watching or listening, and yeah, we hope to see you next time. God bless you.
God bless you.